Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Civil Beat's Ideas Live show for February 10th, 2021. As always with these shows, we are live and we invite you to be a part of them by joining us. We're live on Facebook, so you're welcome there to make comments, to ask questions, and we will be sure to include you in our conversation today. Today, we are discussing police reform, which is certainly a topic that is on people's minds these days. In fact, the lead story on Civil Beat today, written by my colleagues Christina Jedra and Nick Gruby, was entitled, "Will This Watchdog Bite? The Honolulu Police Commission is at a Crossroads." So that's up today. And with us, we have two people who've thought very deeply about the police, the role of the police in our society, police reform, and we're very honored to have with us Ken Lawson and Randy Franklin. And both men have written essays for us in Civil Beat within the last year. Ken wrote an essay for us, which was published on July 5th of this year. It was entitled, "Here's One Thing We Can Do to Get Better Policing." The subtitle was, "Building Trust and Better Communication Between Citizens and Police Should Start with a Separate, Independent Civilian Oversight Board to Review Concerns of Misconduct." Randy's article, which ran on December 7th, was "Police Officers Should Be Held Personally Financially Liable for Their Misconduct," subtitled, "All Officers Should Be Required to Carry a Supplemental Professional Liability Insurance Policy for Misconduct." So we'll drop links to both of those articles in the Facebook page where we're streaming live, so you can look at those and read them in depth, but they'll be a starting point for our conversation today. And first, I want to begin by thanking you both for being here. And we tend to start these shows with asking people to introduce themselves to the viewers and just tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and how you came to be involved with the subject of police reform. Ken, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can. So my name is Ken Lawson. I'm a professor here at the University of Hawaii William S. Richardson School of Law. But I became involved with the police from a young age. I grew up in a ghetto, so to speak, and so it was always police contact, and I grew to distrust the police, still do. Then I went on to law school, and once I started practicing law, my area was criminal defense work and civil rights for police misconduct. And so I did a lot of police misconduct cases. I did a lot of criminal defense cases involving unlawful police searches and stuff like that, and did a lot of motions to suppress. And then and I eventually did a class action lawsuit in Cincinnati that led to a lot of police reform that's still being used as a national model now on how to make the police department more accountable and how to better community police relations. And so hopefully the audience will have a link to the YouTube video that Bloomberg did in 2015 about the work that we had done in 2001 in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so even being here at the law school, teaching in the area of search and seizures and criminal law and running the Hawaii Innocence Project, it's just natural for me to be involved in police reform.
Okay, thank you so much, Ken.
You're welcome.
And I think we're really looking forward to hearing a lot today about what happened, some of the specifics about what you accomplished in Cincinnati. Randy, can you share with our viewers a little bit about your background and how you came to this topic of police reform?
Sure. First, thank you for having me. I am a former LAPD sergeant for 30 years. And I came about it as a sergeant, as a police officer. I saw the injustice on the street as a police officer. And I had to ask myself, how do you hold somebody accountable who has nothing to lose with all the injustices that were occurring that I saw? I tried to make a difference as a sergeant out in the field with the police. And I came to the conclusion that, most police officers need to put some skin in the game and stop wasting taxpayers' money. That's why I came up with the article and the idea with my nonprofit. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today and answering anybody questions that they have for me regarding policing.
Okay. That's great. And once again, we invite anybody who's watching, if you have questions, please, by all means, share them with us. You know, a question that I have to start is, when we talk about police reform, it makes me think about, what is it that actually we want to achieve in the ideal? If we were to look out and say, we accomplished the reform, now we have a police force that's functioning the way that we want it to. What does that actually look like in practical terms?
I'll
Who
let
wants to
Randy go
take
ahead.
that first?
What it looks like is fairness. It looks like no prejudice, no racial profiling, dispensing the law fairly across the board to everyone. No perceived notions of who you are and what you are based upon just driving in a car or walking down the street. That would be an ideal place for police officers, and for them to understand their policies, procedures, and their manuals that was enacted by the legislative branch of the government. That would be a perfect world for the police.
I mean, to me, I just think the police are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing what they built to be doing. When you go back to slave patrols, right, and if you go back to the history of policing in the United States of America, it starts with slave patrols, and you continue on up to today. And so, even if the police are doing what they are geared to do, right, it is geared to keep the haves from the safe from the have-nots. And so it's not just about having the police abide by their manuals. It's not just about having the police abide by the rules. It's how do we police? See, you can abide by the rules, but then go down in Waianae and make more arrests of Native Hawaiians than you do over here in Kahala. And people doing dope in Kahala is saying what they doing in Waianae, but you don't see that rate of arrest. And so again, as far as where we're looking for imperfect policing, I think the whole system needs to be revamped, because if the system is going to work the way it was designed, it's doing what it's supposed to do. And you can see that in some of the studies that Civil Beat has done and has been done throughout the nation. And again, this is backed up by studies. This is just not me talking about it. The system right now, when you talk about the racial disparity, right, the sentencings that are being higher sentences imposed on people of color. People of color are arrested more, right? Go back to the 90s when crack was flooding the streets, right? And look at the way heroin's being treated. Now the epidemic now is opioids, but since it's affecting a lot of the white community, you see it's not the same type of harsh treatment that it was when it was crack cocaine. And so again, I don't want to belabor the point, Julie, but no, it ain't about just obeying a manual. You can obey a manual and still abide by the system and end up with the disparity. That's what it was designed to do.
Mhm. So the reform has to be profoundly deep. Can you talk, Ken, about what you did in Cincinnati, what you were able to accomplish there?
Um, yeah, what we did there, it's like I said, going back to the mid 90s, I started representing families, mainly of unarmed Black men who have been killed by the police in Cincinnati, Ohio. And by the time of April, in fact, we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary. On April 9th of 2001, Cincinnati police had killed the 15th unarmed Black man in a 2-year period. So they erupted into riots, and instead of going to court and getting the city to settle, instead of going to court and just trying a case, what we did was we came up with a collaborative process. And we got a big grant from a Jewish foundation. We brought in individuals to poll the community on what the community wanted to see as far as what can make a better police force. And so the Black community was part of the collaborative. The police union was part of the collaborative. The city Cincinnati Police Department, the city of Cincinnati, We had attorneys from Washington, D.C. We ended up with the monitor. And we got into this process. And the YouTube video that you're going to provide a link to kind of shows that. But it was, and we invited the Justice Department to come in also. And John Ashcroft was the Attorney General at that point under President George Bush. And we started addressing use of force. We started addressing community problem-oriented policing. We set up an independent civilian review panel that had the ability to subpoena officers to come and testify, and had the ability to impose punishment. And that was, so when you look at Nick's article in Civil Beat today, along with Christina's, and they're talking about the police commission, and will they appoint somebody with some teeth? What we're talking about is what is the oversight here? See, the problem here is that there's really no independent review board that has any power to discipline officers and has any power to effectuate any structural change throughout the police department. And so that's why the Chief Ballard and others can come in front of our police commission and say whatever it is they want to say, and nothing happens, because the commission only has a certain amount of power. So you have a couple of good people on there trying to do, with Michael Broderick, with Doug Chin, trying to at least investigate to see what changes need to be made, but if they don't have any power to impose it. And so that's some of the stuff that we did in Cincinnati. When it came down to, Civil Beat also did an article about the racial disparity, right? And here in Hawaii, right? And the arrests and stuff like that. And so what we came up with in our collaborative process was that anytime a police officer had contact with the citizen, even if they didn't make an arrest, they had to fill out a contact card. Why did you stop and talk to this young man, and why not? Right? How old was he? What was the purpose of your stop? How long did you stop him? Even if you didn't make the arrest. And that way supervisors could look at these individuals' contacts and say, you know what, it seems like you're stopping a lot of these guys walking up and down the street and they ain't doing nothing illegal. Maybe you need some more training. It seems like you're unholstering your gun at traffic stops at a crazy rate. Maybe you need some more training. And so it had a positive effect, but it took federal oversight, Julie. In other words, the police don't want to give up no power. And so either you're going to have a consent decree to when they violate it, and Cincinnati police did violate it numerous times, right? At least you have a federal judge that's going to enforce that change. Without that, there's not going to be any change, because why should they?
Randy, you want to add anything to this?
Sure. I want to add, I agree with Ken. There is targeted selective enforcement, and that is wrong when there's targeted selective enforcement. But as Ken stated on his unholstering policies or his business card or contact policy, you got to remember, those are policies that you have to adhere to. In our LAPD manual, if you did not provide a business card or contact, you got suspended for it. You need rules to regulate police officers. The reason they get away with it so much, if you don't know the rules and the regulations that guard or safeguard you from the police, then when you go in to make a complaint against the police, you need to walk in and say what law we broke, what policy, what rule did we have? I mean, if we have no policies or no laws for the police to follow, how are you going to hold us accountable? You cannot. And that's the problem with the frustration of people is that that if you don't know our manuals and our policies and procedures, you can come in and you don't know how to express yourself when you want to make a complaint against the police. But I agree with Ken. You can't have 50 different states and 100 different counties with their own policies and procedures. We do need a nationwide holstering and unholstering policy. We do need a nationwide business card policy where people have to give their serial number and not their badge number, because a badge number is basically useless. Your serial number is the number that you are hired with, you fired with, you get your benefits with, and you get your pay with. I even knew a whole division in LAPD that switch their badges at night, because you would give if you're white, you give your badge to a black officer. If you're Hispanic, you give it to an Asian officer. And when you use the badge number to come in, They would just simply say, well, what the officer looked like. And you could say he's black, but the badge is to a white officer. But your serial number, you can't lose it. You'll never change it in your whole career. And that should be provided to the public for accountability. But we need laws. We need manuals. We need policies because the police need to be held accountable, not just to go to jail, but just so I can suspend them. We have very powerful unions and lawyers, and we have to follow those protocols. I yield back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess the problem, you know, and I agree with the business card aspect, but what I'm talking about is the context. See, what happens a lot of times, and like I said, it happened to me when I was young, and it continued on even when I was a lawyer. You know, being stopped in blue jeans, or whatever, and being set, you know, pushed up beside your car, and being hand frisked for nothing, right? And then when I'm not arrested for anything, and if I really don't understand the law, what am I going to do? Right? Because I'm not charged with anything.
Right.
Right. And so again, the contact cards require the police not just to give me your name and address, but they have to fill those out so that they can explain why in the hell you stopping me. Why are you running up on me because I'm standing on the corner talking to my friends? Right. And because the way it happens, and I'm sure Randy will say this, it is get up against the wall. See, that was my first contact with the police. I mean, I'm in the ninth grade, just hanging out on the corner talking because it was too damn hot to stay in the house in the summertime. And next thing you know, we all pushed up against the wall, being patted down and humiliated for doing what? Talking, right? And so then once they leave, well, you know, nothing happens. And so again, look, I mean, look at Hawaii. When you criminalize homelessness, who you think that's going to affect? So even if you're enforcing the laws that's on the books, it's going to have a disproportionate impact against poor people, Black people, and Native Hawaiians and Micronesian and other people, and Filipino, other people of color. Right? Again, like I said, to me, you know, the system needs to be reformed. But until that happens, what can we do to make it better? And here, at least in Hawaii, the chief of police has to stop trying to ignore the problems that's going on here and say, look, you know what? Because the bottom line is we all want a better police department. We all want a better police force. I can't be better if I'm not willing to take some constructive criticism. And then once I take that criticism, do something to make myself better. It's the same thing with the police department. See, anytime, and go back and look at the last few articles of the last couple of months, anytime anybody presses back on the chief about racial disparity, use of force, sloppiness of training, right? Records being kept secret, records being kept in a haphazard way, some records not even being kept. She pushes back. And then there's nothing for us to do other than just to take her shoving it back. Right? Now, everybody sitting around here knows there's something wrong, but can't nobody do nothing about it. Why is that? Why is that? You know, and so again, there has to be some type of independent board that's able to enforce and reform. You know, and you're going back to, you know, and I agree with Randy that the police have to be held accountable. There's a bill pending in our legislature here in Hawaii that takes away qualified immunity. And qualified immunity is what shields the police from becoming accountable for the constitutional violations they impose on citizens. Look at here. You remember that case down there at the state house, the state capitol, where a deputy sheriff shot a homeless man that was unarmed in the back? Right? Qualified immunity can keep that deputy from being personally liable for that shooting. And so we have a bill pending here at our legislature that is proposing to eliminate qualified immunity for any state claim for a state constitutional, a violation of a state constitutional right. Now, keep in mind that that won't affect federal, you know, when I used to sue police, I would sue them under section 1983, 42 USC 1983, civil rights law. And you see, you know, with the George Floyd case, Breonna Taylor, they all sued under 42 USC section 1983. That's federal, right? And their qualified immunity, hopefully will, you know, our federal qualified immunity hopefully will get revisited by the U.S. Supreme Court. But here in Hawaii, there's a bill pending that's saying, you know what, for Hawaii law enforcement officers who are sued for violating the Hawaii Constitution, they will no longer have the ability to rely on qualified immunity. We prevent you from suing them. So.
Ken, can I ask you about the Civilian Oversight Board? Because, you know, your piece that you wrote for us about it was so strong. Again, clearly from what you've said today, it's very evident that it's necessary to have some sort of mechanism for the citizenry to use. How would we go about creating that?
The state legislature would have had to create it, right? So somebody would have to pose a bill. The state legislature would have had to create it. They would have to fund it, right? And the one we created in Cincinnati, we had 3 full-time investigators. And remember, the complaint process was transparent. Now, it stayed, once you filed a complaint against an officer, that stayed secret until, you know, there was some probable cause to bring an, you know, for the investigators to bring an official complaint. That way it protects the officer's privacy. Here in Hawaii, right, you can file a complaint and nobody knows whatever happened to it. Who tracks the complaint process for HPD? Tell me, I don't, because I don't know, right? And then once the complaint is done, where is the report on what happened? How is that complaint dealt with? See, we get people calling us at the Innocence Project saying, you know what, I filed a complaint, so and the police won't tell me what's going on with it. I can't figure out why, you know, what's happening with it. And so going back to that, I think if we create an independent review board that has no political connection, as Randy was pointing out, right? And it has the ability to impose discipline. It has the ability to investigate the complaints. And it has the ability to make structural change. That's something that again, because that would make it transparent. And here's the bottom line. It makes the police department better. It makes our community safer, right? And if you go back and look at the work that we did in Cincinnati and watch that, over a long period of time, the complaints that citizens were making about the police started decreasing. The use of force incidents started decreasing because because people were being held to account. It's not perfect, right? But I mean, we have to start somewhere.
Randy, when you were in the LAPD, what sort of oversight was there?
We had it all. We had the complaint system that you get a number, you come in, anyone can make a complaint. We had a 1-800 number that you can call and make a complaint on an officer. And it was on our contact or business cards, as you call it, at the bottom. If you thought that the police was unprofessional or didn't treat you correctly, you can turn over the card. And it's a complaint system where once you make a phone call, you have to take the complaint as a supervisor or you will be suspended. I agree with Ken. You need a advisory board or a complaint board that adjudicate these perfectly, as I stated in my article, and that the complaint board would look at the supervisor who did the complaint. I mean, I put in there because you had 2 incidents at HPU where that officer beat his wife and she ended up getting $325,000 and the guy drove drunk. It's like the fox watch in the hen house. If you get a bad investigation from a supervisor, and then the officer get off because the investigation was bad. So you need a robust complaint system or advisory board to look at any complaints, because, like I said in the beginning, what do you do with an officer who has nothing to lose? If I can't suspend you and I can't sue you, and officers know that, then they won't take domestic violence report when a victim walks in. They won't follow the rules and regulations because there's no recourse for them. There's no recourse when you sue them civilly, as I stated, because taxpayers pay for it. But yes, we need a complaint system. We need contact cards, especially for HPD. We need a holster and unholstering policies. So that when officers take their gun out of a holster, that you'll get to know why you take it out, because your gun out your holster on a traffic stop does not fit into any use of force scale I know of. If it's just a ticket, it has to escalate to the level of bringing your gun out, but that doesn't happen all the time. So I agree with Ken 100%. I agree that the legislative branch need to change some of these laws. I agree that uh, uh, qualified immunity is one of the worst written laws in the nation. And people got to understand that that law was written in 1871 to combat the Klan, but the Klan has civil rights too. And after we got some teeth in the qualified immunity with Harlow versus Fitzgerald, the qualified immunity got to the point that you have to prove now that the officers knew the law, excuse me, that they knew the law, which is crazy because you're saying that the officers don't even know the Bill of Rights, which is the most violated laws out there. Or they say that if you enforce qualified immunity, the officers won't work. Or it's just crazy ideas they have behind qualified immunity. Do I believe it should be eliminated? I do. You shouldn't be able to violate anybody's constitutional rights and then get to say, well, I didn't know the law existed. I didn't know the Fourth Amendment was there, so I violated your rights. So yes, let's revamp it, rethink it. I think it should be completely eliminated personally as a police officer. So
and just for sake of clarity, the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1871. The qualified immunity is judge-made law. It's not a written law. It wasn't written into the Civil Rights Act. It came in the late 60s and then was revisited in 1982. And that's why the Supreme Court, even as conservative as Justice Clarence Thomas is saying that there's no basis in the Constitution for qualified immunity. With respect to the problem with it is, if the officer says, look, I didn't know, there had never been a case exactly like mine to where one happened in Arizona where a lady had a mental issue and she and her roommate was arguing. She came outside, she had a kitchen knife. Two officers were already at the scene, and the lady was holding a kitchen knife at her side, talking to her roommate. The other officer rolls up real quick, jumps out at the cruiser and shoots her. Even when the other two police officers that had been there had not seen any threat. And qualified immunity basically said that he cannot be sued individually. He's immune from suit. He's shielded from liability because there was no other case exactly like that one that would give him notice that in this situation, when a person is out with a knife, talking to a neighbor, you shouldn't shoot them. That's how crazy it is. So it's not about not understanding the Fourth Amendment. The qualified immunity says you have to be able to show that underneath these specific facts, lady standing outside with the kitchen knife at her side, that you should know in these specific. Same thing went on down here at the Capitol with the homeless man who weighed. I mean, this guy weighed 125 pounds and stood at 5'2", unarmed, homeless, shot in the back. Right. And you know what I'm saying? And so if the police officer is able to say that, you know what, I fear for my life. And in Hawaii, you have to show that the officer didn't act with evil intent. What am I talking about, Julie? What I'm saying is, in order to make the police officer liable, so let's say that this was a relative of yours and you sued the police and you shouldn't have shot my relative in the back. You violated his Fourth Amendment right to be free from an unreasonable seizure. Shooting him is a violation of his Fourth Amendment right. It's a seizure, right? The officer can say, you know what, I'm immune from suit, right? Because the Supreme, under Hawaii law, you have to show that I had an evil intent. I acted with what they call malice when I killed him. And I was just scared. I wasn't being malicious. I may have made a mistake, but I was fearful. And under Hawaii qualified immunity, you can't get paid. And no one's held to account, even though the man was unarmed and shot in the back, which means obviously he couldn't have been threatening your life. So if it sounds like I'm angry, it's because I am.
You're not angry. You're just, the law is frustrating, and people should understand that when it comes to the law. And that's why I said we have to I tell people, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. I tell them, you have to understand your rights. And then you have to understand the rights that they give to police. Because as time go on, they're giving more and more rights to the police and taking more and more rights from you.
Yeah, but see again, even knowing my rights, to hear an officer say to you, nigga, what you gonna do? You gonna tell him what you think gonna happen to me? I'll be back here next week on the same corner kicking your ass again. Right? Because one, I'm protected by the union. Two, I'm not gonna get fired. Three, it's my word against yours, and who gonna believe you? Who gonna believe you? Now, when I tell the judge that you was resisting arrest and pushing on me, you think he gonna believe you or me? Right? And then you get down to court, and having done these cases, I represented Deion Sanders when he was playing for the Cincinnati Reds and the Dallas Cowboys, and Deion got arrested coming out the Cincinnati Reds stadium by an off-duty police officer who did not know he was a professional baseball player, because Deion had on a baseball cap and shorts and was riding a scooter, and he called Deion all kind of boys. Right. And then Deion wasn't taking it. And so next thing you know, he's charged with resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, assault on a police officer, all these things. Right. And until the officer didn't know who he was. And he's telling Deion, ain't nobody gonna believe you. And it took white concession workers who were working the concession stands at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati to come to court to say that that officer was lying on Deion, because that's the attitude. And so it don't matter if I know my rights.
Well, no,
when you're going to abuse them, right? And that's what happens.
But if you don't, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Randy. Go ahead.
No, but if you don't know them, then you give the police carte blanche to do what he wants to do to you. At least me and you know, if a police stop us, what to say, what to do. We can ask for supervisors. We can figure out some of the things they're doing. We just can't throw our hands up and say, they're going to treat me this way anyway. There are reports.
No, but if you say you can't search my, look, I done cases where my clients said, man, you can't search my car, and they done threw them out the car and searched it anyway. Or no, you ain't got a search warrant to come in my house, and they come in there anyway. Then they claim exigent circumstances. Well, I heard them flushing the toilet. I thought they was destroying the marijuana, so I kicked the door in. And my clients, and you know, look, from doing criminal law, some of these guys, people, my students always ask me, Professor Lawson, when you practice law, did you want to know if your client was guilty or not? And I tell them the same thing I'm telling you. Look here, most people that was involved in illegal activity, real criminals, they knew not to lie to their lawyer. They knew not, right? Because they know, if I know that you telling me the truth, then I know when the cops is lying. And so you would have them come in there saying, look here, Lawson, man, I had the kilo of cocaine in the trunk of my car. But I told that officer he wasn't searching my car. You know what he did? You know what I mean? And so again, and you know this as well as I do, Randy. Next thing you know, officer said, well, he gave me consent to search the car, or he gave me consent to enter the house. And your client sitting there telling you, no, man, they lying through that. So how do you prove it?
I'm not saying that it doesn't. I know it occur. I have seen it occur, but we still have to know that they violated our Fourth Amendment rights, so we can tell our Lord, listen, I didn't give him permission to search my car. So you have something to fight for.
Right. But here's the problem though, Randy. Here's the problem. The reason why police do that is because judges allow it. See, I done had cases, man, where the judge know the cop lying. They know the cop lying, but they ain't they're not gonna rule against the cop. Right. And so the cop, that's why the cop is telling me when I'm in the 9th grade and telling others, who you think gonna believe you? You think the judge gonna believe you over me? Right. And so so as long as judges to let these lying cops come into court, lie on these people, and these people end up with wrongful convictions, why should a cop stop? Even after the citizen knows his rights.
Listen, I can tell you cops that perjured themselves on stand and wrote a false police report. I'm not going to say it doesn't occur, but we're trying to teach people of how do we change it. And you have to know something. You have to know your rights. You have to know the law. You have to know the Bill of Rights. You have to know something.
Randy, even if you know it, what is the incentive for the officer to follow it if he's not being or she's not being punished?
That's our question here. How do we get the police officers? How do we make it so that the police are held accountable for
No,
all the dirt that we do?
We're on the same page, but what I'm saying is the fact that I know my rights ain't gonna stop it.
No, I didn't say that, but at least I know what to tell my judge. At least I know to say the police. At least I know that. At least I know to ask for a supervisor. Maybe I'll get a good one. At least I know to do something. I have seen minorities mainly talk or don't use their Fifth Amendment right or their Fourth Amendment right because they don't know them. And then when they have to go to a lawyer like yourself, you're asking them questions. It's nice that they show up and say, listen, Attorney Lawson, I told him not to search my car. And now we got cell phones, and I have it on cell phone that I told him he violated my rights. I told him that even though he used pencil versus the Mims law, getting them in and out of their car, you can. It's nice to have a client who has some knowledge of some laws.
I understand that, but the reason why I'm pushing back on this, Randy, is because you make it seem like it's the citizen's fault who doesn't know the law on why they're getting jacked up by the police, and that's my right. I shouldn't have to know the law for you to be lawful. In other words, if I don't know the law, does that mean that the police should have a right to violate my rights? And so the only reason I'm pushing back on this is it makes it seem like the citizens need to know the law so that they can stop the police from doing this. And I'm saying the police shouldn't be doing this stuff in the first place.
I'll agree with you because we are paid to protect and serve. But if we know everything else, we can at least learn something to protect us. I'm not blaming them for not knowing the law. I'm not blaming them saying.
See, the difference between you and me is that I believe police is paid to protect and serve the rich white communities. That's who they paid and protect and serve. I mean, look here, man. When you look at the insurrection that happened and the impeachment that's going on right now, that happened on January 6th. Now you had all them Blue Lives Matter folks, right? Them Trump supporters. Hey, Blue Lives Matter. You know, we pro-police. And then when the police when they wouldn't do what they want, then now they're anti-police. They beating up police with the American flag, killing cops, right? When there wasn't no respect in the police when it came to their rights. And all I'm saying is it's always been a system that when it comes down to protecting and serving, is who are they being paid to protect and who are they being paid to serve? Because it ain't people like us. The way they police in my community ain't the same way they police in the white communities in Cincinnati, by no means. You look at the pandemic, when they started enforcing these COVID crazy laws that this kooky mayor, former mayor, was passing along with the governor, it was being enforced against people of color, Native Hawaiian, Filipino, Micronesians at an astronomical rate. Right. And you know, white folks was going maskless too, just like everybody else. Right. But they ain't getting warnings. So again, you know, I had to push back.
You can push back. I agree with you that I said it was targeted enforcement. I agree that on certain parts of town, I worked in South LA and then I worked at Venice Beach, and there is selective targeting. But the problem, I'll give you a story. When I worked Venice Beach, when I worked South LA, most minorities didn't even know to ask for a complaint. They just thought that's the way it's supposed to happen to them. The police just, you know, they throw you down, get you up, brush you off, make you sit on the curb. I had two officers. I'll give you a quick story. I had two officers who came to the West Side, and they pulled a white lady out of her car and handcuffed her on an infraction. And the first thing she said to me as a supervisor, I got there, she said, they must be from the South Side of town because we don't do that shit over here, she said. And I asked her, I said, what do you have her for? Oh, she ran a stop sign. And why is she in handcuffs? She formed a complaint against them. And then a lot of officers, I had another officer, a young white girl who works South Central LA. She came to the West Side and she got confronted at the desk by a white lady who was telling her the law. I intervened and went to the desk and got the officer out of it and told the lady she's right and got it done. The officer looked at me and said, I'm going back to South Central LA. She said, because over there, they don't question you. And she transferred the next month back to the Black area.
Yeah, I hear you, Randy.
We have to know what to say to police. We have to defend ourselves. We have to arm ourselves with the law. And I'm not blaming anybody for not knowing the law, but we can learn something. We can learn if they give you a citation, you can look up the section. Hell, we play TikTok videos and everything else you do.
No,
You can
I
spend the
agree with
time
that.
to look at the section. Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
That's all I'm saying. And I'm not blaming anybody for not knowing.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page.
I mean, it just seems like what keeps coming up again and again is power. Who's got power? Who doesn't have power? How power is being abused? How power is being used against people who have less power? And so again, if we're looking at this systematically, looking at accountability, looking at transparency, how can we actually change it? You know, one of the things, Ken, I to ask you about is, you know, you were talking about in Cincinnati, this idea that every time somebody got stopped, there had to be a record of it. And I was curious how well that works. How did the cops respond to that? Were they, did they come around to doing that?
It took a federal judge to enforce it, right? Because I mean, when we first started, man, they, you know, they thought, when we first started, they kind of thought, well, you know, this is some BS, right? So it got settled and so and we had a very active federal judge, and she's still on the bench today. God bless her, but she wasn't playing, man. And so no, they didn't want to do the cards. They didn't want to do any of the reporting. If we gave them notice, we had a right to go. Us attorneys for the plaintiffs had the right to go into the police department to check their use of force records, all this stuff. And they had to allow us access if we wanted to do ride-alongs at a moment's notice. So then they push back, and so then we go to federal court, and then the judge will hammer them over the head with the consent decree, right? And basically either hold the chief or someone else in contempt, and the chief ain't gonna sit in jail. And so, you know, that will motivate them to get in order. And so it took a long time for them, but finally it came around because what it did was it made them better at policing. It made the complaints go down. And I think that's the point that Randy and I are trying to make, is that when we're talking about better, see, most people say, well, you guys are anti-police. You know, y'all sound like y'all just mad at, right? And that's not what it's about. What it's about is making the police department better. Look at HPD. I mean, you look at all these shootings. Civil B did an article on it within the last year about the police, the death in custody and the shoot. And it's not like I believe that the officers are going out there with the specific intent to kill people. I mean, when you look at it, it's a lack of training. I mean, right? And because there is no transparency in how we're training our police officers. And when you talk to the chief about it, instead of just saying, you know what, we could have done this better, they always want to justify the shootings. It's like I said, the same thing with the unarmed man down there getting shot in the back. Instead of somebody saying, you know what, this is kind of messed up, we need to start training a little bit better. We're sorry the guy died. You know, we don't, you know, whatever. And let's get back at our training rather than do that. Right. And then you got the police unions. You got to get rid of them. I mean, look here. If you got, go look at some of Nick Gruby's articles about some of these officers that was punching their girlfriends, punching their wives, and Randy talked about, you know, the next thing you know, they go through arbitration. If they get fired, they get their job back. If they get fired, a lot of times they're not getting fired, right? And so because of the strength of the union. And so if I'm a police officer and I know that I can commit crimes and not lose my job, I can commit crimes and not be sued, I can commit crimes and not be demoted, what deters me from committing constitutional violations? Nothing. You make me mad, I get to do with you what I want to do. And there's, right, because there's no consequence to me, even when it's on videotape.
I agree. And I would say that as a cop, I'm going to tell you, we're not going to stop until you make a stop. And that's just it. That's why he said, how do you hold somebody accountable who have nothing to lose? And it's not training. We have tons of training. Here's the problem when a police officer get in trouble. You're not see the training that I had. So you don't even know if I had 56 or 150 hours of domestic violence training, because my training record is confidential. Why? I have no idea why it's confidential. It has no personal information in it. It's just state that the training that you, the taxpayers, paid for me. And why can't we let somebody see it? We defer to, he needs more training. But what happens if he ignores his training? And most of the time, officers are ignoring their training because they believe there's no repercussions for them. Even on LAPD, we even had a suspension policy. Even if I got suspended for 60 days, I had insurance to cover it, so I didn't lose one dime of money. It's hard to regulate me or hold me accountable for anything if I have nothing to lose. Like civil suits, taxpayers pay every dime of a civil suit. The guy that beat his wife, his wife got $320,000 because the the officer did not take a report. And what happened to the officer? Nothing. And I'll tell people when we talk about money, most lawsuits are the police suing the police, not you civilians suing us. We sue ourselves more than anybody sue us. And so we can get that taxpayer dollar for violation of our harassment or retaliation. So you have to figure out a way how you going to hold me accountable for my bad behavior. And when I create bad behavior and I come back and the sergeant, lieutenant, and everybody covers it up, it just lets me know to go back out there and do it again. I become a professional liar if I go to court and you let me lie on stand. You might catch me once or twice, but over 5 to 10 years, I become a professional liar if I have to. So there should be, we should scrutinize reports. If you get caught lying in your report or you perjure yourself on the stand, it should be the end of your career, but it's not. So why not lie? Why not perjure yourself? Why not do a use of force that you come in? Most defense attorneys, like Professor Lawson, you can read a police report and look at it before you go to trial. Go, holy crap. You can catch tons of them writing a false police report, which is a misdemeanor. Why aren't we held accountable for lying in our reports? Why aren't we held accountable if we get caught on stand and we perjured ourselves? Why don't defense attorneys, especially if they're provided by the DA, why don't they ask officers the first question of, have you ever lied in your report or perjured yourself? Should be the first question you ask them. There's a lot of different things that goes on that we have to do to take the power away from police officers. Because we have extraordinary power. I can pull over anybody I want. I can pull over doctors, lawyers, politicians, and most of the time, people of status, first thing they do is tell me who they are. And they get upset when I say, that's mildly interesting, sir. Can I have your driver's license? And then I have to ask them a question, sir, did you tell me who you are? Are you trying to bribe me or coerce me into letting you go? And then I got a supervisor coming. But that's the status of everything. And yes, police are very powerful. That's why I don't understand letting a police out the academy with an open book test. If you can't pass that test, you should not go on the street with a gun.
Well, like I said, I agree with what Randy's saying. I just think too, though, Julie, that when you look at like some of the protests that's been going on here with the turbines, some of the protests that's been going on, I was involved over there on the Monarch, and opposing the building of the 30-meter telescope, and how the police were used to harass the hell out of citizens just standing up for their constitutional rights. And what I'm saying is that it goes back to who are you protecting and serving. Same with the COVID pandemic. And I guess my real problem is that when it comes to holding them accountable, as Randy was talking about, when, qualified immunity protects them, when the union protects them. And here's the thing about the training, because again, I still think in certain areas there's a lack of training and a lack of caring. You go back and look at some of the death in custodies that happen with mentally ill people or people that they say may be under the influence of drugs. And these people aren't on, right? Now, as well as I do that they, at the state mental institution, that they can subdue people all day long and they ain't killing them. They subdue people they subdue people that lose it all day long, and you ain't reading no reports about mental patient died while the hospital tried to get him in restraints. But you see it happening here, right? With the police department, not just here, but nationwide. Go look at the George Floyd case. Right now, I mean, you know, here's a guy that's skin and bones, and you got officers, right, who basically, even put aside the one who had his knee on his neck, the other officers that stand around, as Randy was alluding to, and just watching this stuff happening. The other officers that know these cops are lying. Look at the ex-chief of police here in Hawaii. I mean, that takes some arrogance for you and your police department, along with your crooked wife, to think that you can set a man up for stealing a mailbox that you know he didn't steal, right? And then charge him with a federal crime. And you're willing to send him away. I mean, in other words, it gets back to that same point where the chief is saying, I can charge you and do with you what I want to do. And the other officers, the same thing. We can charge and do with you what I want to do, even if you're innocent. Because again, it's our word against yours. And so, and that's a lot of power. And if you ain't got no money to hire a lawyer, and you made to go, you know, our public defenders work day and night, and they are overworked. They only got one, maybe two invest at the most for the whole Oahu. If you're a prosecutor, you got the whole police department at your beck and call. If you need a witness picked up, you can send a police cruiser to go, right? So if you ain't got no money and you get charged in the system by the police and you believe you're innocent, but you can't get your bond, right? So, but you got to go to work the next day. Because if you don't go to work the next day, you and your kids is going to be out on that beach and out whatever apartment you in. And so instead of going to trial, you take a plea to a crime you didn't do because you want to get out of jail. And so, you know, again, the whole system needs to be revamped. The unions need to be, you know, if you ask me, Julia, Kenny, why don't you just go ahead and create your own police state? Create your own thing. It's your state. You get to choose how you want your police to run. Hey, man, we defund them. We take it away the union and allow police to do what's policing, and allow mental health professionals to respond to these, you know, and separate it, because in fairness to the police, they get called for everything. Unruly kids, right? So now I'm rambling, sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm going to push back on it. I want to let people know that to maintain my police license in all states, that you are required to take mandatory training, which is post. And we do train on how to deal with the mentally ill. And there's a difference between violent male mentals and mentally ill. So I believe police are very well trained. They just ignore their training. The reason we say they're not trained is because we need a law to let us look at the police training record. Tell me why you picked up this male mental, or you did what you did when we sent you through 80 hours of training on this and you ignored all your training. If, you know, police use training as an excuse when they get in front of the media that we're going to retrain these officers without telling us this officer had 8 hours of training that he ignored. So what do you do with an officer who think that policies and procedures?
But they ain't saying that. They ain't saying that this officer had training that he ignored. That what they saying.
I know.
Here in Honolulu, what they saying is he didn't do nothing wrong. What they saying is that the officer was justified in whatever it is. Go back and look at. Give me a case where they saying here in Hawaii that the officer ignored his training. You ain't gonna see that shit here. You may see it in LA. But they ain't even admitting that. What they trying to say, push on us, is that we don't need no special training. We don't need no bias training. We don't need any extra training. Every shooting that we've had, every person that died in custody, we believe our officer acted appropriately. And that's the problem, because you can't get no better if you're not willing to take constructive criticism, look at yourself to see if it can be better. You know, Randy, I mean, I'm sure you
can we say the same thing? I'm saying we need where we can get his training record so they can't use that excuse. We need to know when an officer do something wrong. We need to know why he did it and what training did he have. But they do hide that. I said, why is that confidential? I don't know. We all should be able to get that record.
It's confidential because they don't want you to see the truth. That's the only reason why it's confidential.
I agree.
Right.
Let's get it.
But Randy, look at the case of I can't remember his name, but Eric Sykes did the case. It's a young man who was an ex-military. He was homeless at the point, and they tased him, and he ended up dying after they continuously tased him, and he had generated a heart attack, right? So again, you know as well as I do that your training says your taser is to be only deployed when you are in danger of great bodily harm or death. It's a substitute for the gun, and you can't just tase somebody because they're not obeying your commands, right? I mean, even on that use of force continuum, you can't, right? And so they tasing the guy, they're scared, right? And they tase him, and he's dead. And to me, that has a training issue, unless you're saying it's not a training issue if they're doing it with evil intent.
No, I'm saying they were trained, and when we ask him why you did that, why did you go up the use of force scale properly? We need to know that one, you was trained with the use of force scale. Two, you was trained with mentally ill people. The third thing is, why did you ignore all of your training and do what you want to do?
Because my natural, okay, if you're I was in the military, right? You get trained so much that it becomes second nature. Same with when I play football, you go through practice so much that actually it becomes a instinctive reaction as opposed to really a thinking process. When you get trained through the academy and you're not repeatedly trained over and over again on certain things like that, you're going to revert back to your natural instinct, which is to protect myself first. And I'm pulling out this taser, right?
Ken, I'm
And
saying that we are trained. I'm telling you, we are
you talking
extensively
about,
trained.
I'm talking about HPD now. You LAPD, yeah, y'all got sued so many times with so many riots that yeah, y'all ain't had no choice but to get trained after a while.
Well, HPD needs to go to training too. All I'm saying is, if we want to correct the police accountability stuff, this is the stuff we need to ask for so that we can track them. We
Right,
need to
right, right.
track these officers, not just let them walk away with this stuff.
Absolutely, and that's one thing that we
Right.
did. That's one thing we did in Cincinnati and collect. They had to track all that stuff, right?
Track it. That's all I'm saying. We need to
Yeah.
track it. If we're asking what we need to do for police accountability, this is some of the things we need to do for police accountability. There needs to be a use of force nationwide. There need to be, I keep saying unhosted, there be contact cards nationwide. Some of the laws that we can do nationwide, and I'm hopefully the new administration will, that we can enact all across the board so that every state is the same. Not that every state makes it up as they go, but I'm saying that I believe even HPD is well trained, but they ignore their training, and then we can't find out
But
because
how
there's
do you
no
know?
way to make it.
How do you know if they're well trained? You can't see their records.
I said, I believe they're well trained. I don't know if they're well trained.
Well, okay, but look at the evidence, right? So again, the records that they gave to the FBI, and Civil Beat did a summary report on that, and they did that. I think it was something like they only saw 7% of the violent crime cases that how well trained. 7% of violent crimes are, right? So that means that what 93% of violent crimes go unsolved, and you're a well-trained police department. Come on. And you still have all these deaths and as you said, Randy, people had, taxpayers have to pay. You got the chief of police setting people up, his own right, and his minions. Then you got the secret police department following around the ex-coroner. Man, I agree with you.
I agree, Ken. We have to. This is what we have to correct. This is why we have to hold them accountable. This is why we, try to find some politician who is not trying to get the union endorsement that can come on outside and say, these are the rules, because the police have the legislative branch tell us what to do. We just can't ignore the legislative branch and do whatever the hell we want to do.
Okay,
we cannot.
Why is it so hard for us to pass these laws to make the police more transparent? Why is it that we get that people get so much pushback? Why won't the ledge do it? You know why?
Because union endorsements, so they can run on a law and order campaign.
Because the people that contribute are those people that the police keep people like me from them. Right. And so because they see the police as their saviors. And so the people that have the money, the corporations that have the money, and right, keep keep all them people on the west, keep them out there on the west side, protect us over here, right?
And I
Because
agree. When I
and I
went on
think
the west side, go. I'm sorry.
I think that's why it's so hard, because it's to me it's a no-brainer, right? You're a public entity. In order for we should have transparency. You're serving, you're serving the community. So we should, if an officer is disciplined, why not open up the records? For police shootings, why not make it all open? For discipline, why not make it up? Why do you keep this stuff secret and insist on it? And then why do legislatures follow you, to do that? And I just think, again, man, because of the money and stuff behind that.
I'll agree with you. Like I said, I worked on 13 different divisions, and it was a difference when I went on the west side of the like Beverly Hills and those places. It was a difference, and whenever you stopped one of them, you had the biggest crybabies in the world of why you stopping them, because they thought that their status entitled to them to a different police officer. And I enforced the law across the board. I mean, I was towing Rolls Royces and things like that, and they didn't understand why I took their car, because it's not registered. It ain't registered on the south side. It ain't registered on the west side. So the law is the same. It's just that when politicians or people who believe they lead a status, they believe there's a different law for them and there's a different law for the poor people. And when you go to their neighborhood, they know everybody, city councils, mayors, what I had drinks with, I played golf with this person. And when you say that's mighty interesting, I just need your stuff and I'm towing your car. Then they call them on the phone. And then I'm getting the call going, hey, that's my buddy. Your buddy can pick his car up at the impound. Yeah. See, and that's what we're saying. I agree that policing is, it depends. And here's the deal. You can get officers that grew up in South Central LA, will enforce South Central LA as if they never grew up there, and then go force another side of town with kid gloves. And that's being indoctrinated into it and not understanding your policies and procedures in the law. If you put it all the way across the board evenly, then everybody gets the same treatment. But you got to know what that treatment is. And I want you to know, I was a police sergeant, and most of the stuff I read from my officers were, I can't believe you arrested this person. That's not even a crime here. And they were like, well, he pissed me off. The number one thing we got to be careful of is contempt of cop. When a cop become emotional and he think the law is based upon what he feels that day. So there's a lot of things we can do for police accountability. But the number one thing is we got to hold officers accountable for it. You need a complaint board. You need one with teeth. I saw the bill that they have here. What is HB 901? Yeah. Ken, it's one where I think
whatever it is, it doesn't do anything, right? I mean,
no. I think if you don't have any teeth in it, what good?
Yeah, it's useless.
So, but I as a policeman, while I was on the force, I was writing policies that tried to hold police accountable. It was a hard day for me going to work, but I didn't really care because, I'm like Ken. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, so nothing you could do would bother me. But if you try to hold them, there are good police. There are really good police officers out there, but they let the 15 or 20% of officers, bad officers, run roughshod over the police department. And I want people to know who those officers are. We know who's lazy, who's a coward. We know who violates your rights. We know racism. We know those officers on the department. We can pick them out and tell our supervisors who they are. So we know they're on the police department. We have to find a way to weed them out of the police department.
Julie, what you wanted to ask?
And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Randy. No. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we've been talking, and you've done such a great job of detailing the many, many, many egregious problems that exist, the massive imbalance of power that exists, we could say corruption and rot, that maybe behind the whole reason for the police in the first place, that's systemic, right? But how do I go back to my first question, which is, so if we look at this system and we can say it's rife with problems and it's not what we want, you know, what do we as citizens, what can we do here? Should we try and get some sort of initiative process going to create an oversight board that actually has teeth? I mean, what do we do when we look out in our community and we have this, we're reading the stories in Civil Beat, we're seeing that the structural racism is built into the policing. We're seeing that Ken, you cited the statistics on just the numbers of cases that were cleared. And I think last year there were, with property crimes and violent crimes, there were 32,000 cases. And I think there were 2,317 of them closed. So that means that there's a 9 out of 10 chance at the moment that if you bring a case, it's not going to get closed. So, you know, we know it's a really hard job to be a cop. And we know that, I guess I'm just trying to ask, like, for the people who are watching this, for people who want to see the system change, what do we do?
Well, go ahead, Randy.
First thing you have to do is you have to have a complaint system that works. So if a citizen, the average citizen feel that you know, he was contact with the police was unprofessional, or any type of misconduct or bad behavior happened, that he has a recourse, that he can go to a station, make a phone call, and have a active or a real investigation done into his allegations about that police officer. Mm-hmm. Because that police officer is probably maybe have 400 to 500 bad contacts. We need to figure out why he's having bad contacts. So we need a robust complaint system that actually work. When a police is investigated, we need to make sure that the police officer that doing an investigation did a thorough job by giving it to a complaint board to look at and make sure before you do anything that the unions can protect them from. Because the union knows the policies and procedures in the law, and they use technicalities to get that policeman off. We should give it to a person like Ken to go through the report and make sure the I's and the T's are dotted. So if that's a bad policeman, we can get him off. That's the first thing citizens should be able to do. Make a complaint and make sure their voice is heard, and make sure that complaint board is a real, true complaint board with teeth in it, and be able to track these complaints with a number that they give you, and they have a certain amount of time that they have to complete this complaint and get this complaint back to the person that made the complaint, and then have a place where that person, if he doesn't agree with it, can appeal to the police commission or the complaint board to have somebody else look at it. And it doesn't mean all police are bad. It just means that we're thoroughly looking at our police officers now. That's the first thing. And then we got to stop paying for police misconduct. Taxpayers lose millions of dollars a year for misconduct the police do. And I differ for Ken. I don't want to defund the police because I think it would set back police accountability 10 years. But I believe that the police have to put some skin in the game. The police have to be responsible for their misconduct. We got to stop covering up or shielding these police officers with the fear that no one else wants to be the police and we can't find police. And if we enforce discipline or accountability against police, they will stop working. I've heard that 100 times. Oh my God, if you enforce it or you make us do stuff, we're not going to work. We're just going to drive around and do nothing. Or we're going to get to a situation and we won't respond. Well, that's what I want you to do. I want you to get to a situation. I want you to think and evaluate it before you make contact with the public of what laws that you have or what's been violated. Not just get there, as I say, code 3 as fast as you can, and then you don't know what you're doing. And the next thing you know, your gun's out your holster. and you didn't bring none of your non-lethal with you. You didn't bring your baton. You didn't bring your beanbag, your taser that we paid all this money for. You left it all in the car because you got there and ran out, and you end up shooting people in the back for no reason. Those are the simple things for police accountability. I mean, Hawaii needs a contact card, which they don't have, because I've been talked to several policemen. They need that complaint system. There's a lot of things that I have run across HPD officers with since I've been here that they do not do.
Ken, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, I just, the independent complaint authority should be a separate body. It should have full-time investigators that investigate a complaint parallel to whatever the police is doing, as opposed to a board that looks at the police investigation and then reviews it to see if it's up to par. I mean, you put doo-doo in, you're going to get doo-doo out, right? And so if all I'm getting as an investigator or reviewer is what you're telling me through your investigation, it's not much, right? So it should be, the lead should pass for some type of law that will create a fully funded independent review board that has full-time investigators. I agree with Randy. So once the citizen files a complaint, that complaint, I think ours was 90 days. They had 90 days to turn around the investigation and then provide a copy of their preliminary report to the individuals in charge of the board. But secondly, I think, all the cops should be fired and then rehired as non-union. Because I mean, think about it. I'm critical of the chief, but I mean, she can't fire cops. She can't change that structure.
That's
right?
because, right?
I mean, because of the union agreement, right, and the labor agreement that they have, there's a lot of stuff that she can't do, even if she wanted to do. And there's a lot of stuff that allows them through arbitration to get their job back, even when when somebody tries to hold them accountable. So yeah, fire them all, right, and then rehire non-union, interview them, and see, and rehire those that you believe will fit. And I do believe that the police need to be defund the police makes people think, again, and it's the way it's being labeled. But there's certain things that to me are core police functions, and there's certain things that are for mental health professionals, for counselors, etc. I'm not talking about violent situations, but I remember in Cincinnati, one of the cases I did before the riots, 1997, Lorenzo Collins was a mentally ill patient on a locked up ward of the University of Cincinnati psychiatric unit. He escaped in the month of February, 1997. And he was surrounded by 15 police officers. He was in it was like 32 degrees, snowing. He was barefoot in hospital gown. 15 cops literally surrounded him. He picks up a brick and they shoot him through the scrotum, and they shoot him through and they kill him. Right now, here's a guy, like I said. So after that case, part of the settlement was for the Cincinnati police to develop a mental health unit, because they hadn't had one up to that point. To whenever there's a call on mental health, not just the police, but they have to bring their mental health unit there. But still, they shouldn't be doing that. It shouldn't be doing that. Like I said, there's violent mental patients. My wife's a psychiatrist. There's violent mental patients in the state hospital. You don't need to call the police to get them under control. They somehow can get these people under control, and they ain't killing them, and they ain't shooting them at the state hospital. And so the fact that, defund them. And maybe they can solve more of these cases what was this, that 32,000 open cases, and they only solved 2,000. That means if you're a victim of a crime here in Hawaii and you paying all this taxpayer money to the police, hey, man, I'm sorry.
Man, Ken, I got to push back. Okay, first, I'm going to push back on the union.
You can push back all you want to.
Okay, wait, because I needed the union as a good cop. As I told you, I was actively enforcing the law and going out and helping the public. So,
but you're different, man. You wanted the few. You wanted a few, man.
Let me tell you why I needed the union. Because my police department sent me to 6 termination boards because I was actually a good copper. So they tried to retaliate against me. I needed my union protection and my union lawyers, and they threw all the cases out all the time. But our union is there not only to protect us from it's mainly there to protect us from the police department. And we sue the police department because they do not follow their own manual policy and procedures. And most of the time they get sued for sexual harassment and retaliation. So the officers, we're out there, we're working hard. We need our union because when they come after you for sex, or they come after you for something, you can't afford a lawyer of your own. You need the union to assist you with that. And yes, they're powerful and they think they're political. And that's where we need to
they are. They are. Look, all the politics, even from the president on down, all the politicians running always talking about, I'm endorsed by the FOP. I got the endorsement of the police union, right? Why is that? Because they're a powerful union.
And that's why we need our senators like Case and the rest of them to actually say, listen, I'm law and order, but I'm not going to run with that endorsement if it means I will have to compromise my constituents.
Well, they ain't giving no politician nothing to be fair. If I'm giving you money as a union, I want you to side with me. I ain't giving you money to be fair.
But I said we need brave politicians. Now I have to go to defund the police. I believe that defund the police will set us back 10 years. If I was a chief of police, I would want you to defund me. Because remember, as we stated before, the police department doesn't make any money. We don't write enough tickets or confiscate enough drugs to pay for it. We don't even confiscate enough to pay out the civil judgments that we have every year. And if I told somebody, like I said before, that I needed 30% of your budget of your house, then you have to figure out what you can and cannot have. You can't tell me what to do with the budget once you took 30% from me.
Look at all the overtime abuses going on. I mean, look, man,
that's theft.
You got some cops making $200,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? On overtime. They don't tell me about that.
That's theft. Or we're talking about the overtime for the COVID stuff. That's theft from city. They should be fired, all 56 officers. Now, if I'm gonna finish up real quick. If I was a police and I lost 30% of my budget, I would first get rid of those cameras. I would personally get rid of them. And then I would get rid of non-lethal. And then I can't hire police officers. I'll bring them back from the program that you started in Cincinnati. I would bring back my community police. I wouldn't even have any more because I need them for patrol. Then I would get rid of vice and dope and gangs because patrol is the number one meat and potatoes of every police department. I would set back on purpose. I would set back police accountability 10 years if you defund me, just on purpose.
But if a city like, Minneapolis or other cities and defund, obviously they're going to have control over what they're going to have and the budget, et cetera. And so it's not going to be up to the chief of police to say, okay, you're going to defund me, so I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No, I can promise you, and you know as well as I do, it's going to be whatever city and they're doing it that has defunded police, they're going to control what that police force does and fund it the way that they see fit. And so it's not going to just be the chief saying, I'm now mad because y'all defunding me, so I'm going to cut this, and cut that. That ain't going to happen.
But he has to cut something.
But it ain't going to be his decision alone, or he ain't going to be the chief. Because keep in mind, part of that defunding is, like, that's why I say you have to start the whole structure again. Because the bottom line is, who do you work for?
We work for the taxpayers, community, the constituents.
So what's the best way to use those resources? That's right. That's what it's all about. What's the best way to use our police resources to make them effective in what they do and to build a better community?
And I'm going to tell you this for everybody out there that's listening. As a policeman, the two things I hated the most was domestic violence and violent male menace. I never want to run up to a naked man in the street doing stuff, and I have to take him into custody. And people are screaming at you going, he's mentally ill, don't harm him. Well, why don't you come get him? See, I have to take him.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. We talking about killing people, man. We talking about
I'm just telling you. I know that. I'm just telling you the two causes we don't want to handle. We don't want to handle domestic violence.
But that's a crime. Domestic. I'm not saying that defunding police or domestic violence. Y'all got to respond. That's a crime. Whether it's domestic or not domestic, if it's violence, it's a crime.
But what they're saying is, in defund the police, that they should give it to another community police people to take it off our hands. And all domestic. If you arguing with your wife and you haven't hit her, just because
I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about stuff that really is not a police function.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Then we're saying the same thing. But yes, if they could take violent male memos, but that's what I'm saying about defund the police when people talk about it. But we really do. What people are saying is, I'm going to reduce your budget and tell you what to buy.
Yeah.
You
Because
can't do both.
y'all doing a bad job at it. Don't you? The reason why we defunding you is because you messing the stuff up. That's why you getting defunded, right? And so right, and so it gives everybody a chance to go back and regroup to make the whole system better. What you saying is, oh, y'all gonna defund us and leave the same system in. You can't do that.
But that's what they did in Minneapolis. They did that. They defunded them and left the same system in. They just
Well,
gave them less money.
I'm more, and right, but there's others that talk about abolishing the police. There's others that say, fire the whole department and rehire. That way, you get rid of the union. And again, but go back to what Julie just asked. Really, I think here in Hawaii, we could start with an independent, and I think Randy agrees with this, complaint authority that has teeth to it, own investigators doing parallel investigations, and more transparency. Real quick,
And a
because
contact card.
the more people see what's going on with the police department, the more the community will say, you know what, we do need a fix. I'm sorry, Julie.
No, it's fine. So I just want to ask you that idea about this independent complaint board, the oversight board, and you were saying, okay, the legislature has to set that up. What I want to ask is there any other way that you can see that can be created independent of the legislature? Are there any other mechanisms? In other words, if the politicians aren't going to create,
let's say the mayor of Honolulu could set it up and fund it. Obviously, he's going to need funds from somewhere, but I mean, you could get grants from federal grants, et cetera, to fund this. But yeah, the mayor could set it up the same way he's doing the police commission.
Ken, what is, they got a new bill out in Honolulu, HB 1901. I think that's an oversight committee bill that's up there now.
Yeah, but that's the same one that was up there last year, man. It ain't. Go ahead and read through it, Randy, because it ain't got no teeth to it.
That's what I saw that, but I was going to ask you.
I think the AG is on it or gets to a point. To me, it was just really biased. It's not independent civilian review. And when I'm talking about civilian review, it's people from the community that's on the board. You do have some, the investigators have a law enforcement background to go out and investigate it, but it's a civilian review board. Not right. It's not comprised of the attorney general and other law enforcement officers reviewing other law enforcement people.
Well, that's what I was asking.
That's what makes it independent.
And maybe they can build up on that to get rid of this. I read it and I saw that it had no teeth. That's why I wrote it down. I was going to ask you about it. But Julie, that's a start. They just need to, before they pass it, if Ed Casers or any politician, Mizuno or anybody is listening, they need to revamp that so that it has teeth for the oversight committee and make make that complaint board where we track them and then go to the oversight meeting would be the first steps in Honolulu to do. And they do need a contact or a business card that they hand out generic for every contact that they run up against. That's key importance because that helps track an officer and it's transparency because every stop they make, you should be able to say if you don't, you're required to give me one, but if you don't, I can ask you for one and you have it in your card. It's just a generic contact card or generic business card.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, here's a comment from Alexandria that I think really sums things up. She says, brilliant ideas and solutions, Kenneth and Randolph. When do you meet with Chief Ballard? So
Chief Ballard don't want to see. Chief Ballard don't want. I'm the last one. Chief Ballard want to see as much as I'm sorry.
I'll meet with her anytime. Anybody that wants to make a change, I will meet with them. I used to do stuff for Mizuno. I'll meet with anyone that wants to meet and put some of these ideas. And I believe Ken will come with me. I'll beg him and drag him with me. I believe he'll come with me.
The police ain't going to change unless you force them to change. And the way you have to, somebody's, like I said, to me, it's going to take if the mayor or the legislature don't want to create a civilian review board that has teeth to it and is independent from any police division, then a class action suit should be brought. Now, because that's the only thing that's going to effectuate the change. If you go out and you look historically through the United States, and Randy, you know, he worked for LAPD. It was through a whole bunch of class action suits. All those changes Randy talking about, that didn't come because LAPD was saying, hey, you know, let's get better. That came through federal court consent decrees.
Yeah,
All of them.
we had a consent decree after Rodney King, and
But you had it before. You had it before that too in the LA riots in
yeah,
1960. So it was a whole bunch of, you
a
know,
bunch of consent
LAPD.
decrees. But that's what I'm saying. But they need to change, Ken, and you already done this before. So maybe me and you should help them. You already set up a oversight committee before. It should be
It's
just
like Frederick Douglass said, man, power concedes nothing without demand. They got power. That's the reason, you know, they have so much power. They're not going to give it up unless there's, you know, there's a club at them, right? No, I'm willing to talk to anybody, just like you said, Randy. But I mean, to me, it's going to take actual legal change, whether that comes through the legislature, through local council members, and the mayor creating a different body, or through a federal class action lawsuit. But something has to happen.
all right.
Well, listen, I'm so grateful to you both for coming and talking with us
Julia.
today. Clearly, this issue is going to be around for a while, so maybe you'll come back.
I like talking to me and Randy. We're gonna continue this on social media on other days. We're gonna start like a podcast or something.
Yeah, I'm glad you came together.
Absolutely, and we should, because we should get together and do something like that. And Julie, anytime you need me for anything, I am always available for you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Really.
And I love Civil Beat. So thank you for hosting this.
We're here, and I'm serious. Let's see if there's change that comes, what it is, and then get together again at some point in the future to look at where we're at.
All right.
Thank you both, and thanks to the
for-
viewer.
Thank you
We'll be
for
back
having
next
me.
week. We'll be back next week, Wednesday at 2. Aloha.